So my name's Alex Patterson. I am one of the directors and designers of Not for Broadcast.
My name's Andy Murray. I'm the CEO of Not Games, and I also work on Not for Broadcast in various different functions.
So you guys can talk about where the idea to make is it FMV? Is that the title game? Like, where did the idea for this game come from?
Well, so to be honest, a lot of credit has to go to Sam Barlow and her story, to be honest. All of us at Not Games have backgrounds in film, TV, theatre, as well as games. So we always knew that we were trying to find something that used those kinds of skills, I guess. And then I played her story, and the idea of like sort of diegetic video, like where the way he uses video there, that the video, it's not characters on screen talking to you as if you're in the world of video, but actually you're at a PC watching video. That like clicked something for me where I was like, that's cool. I really like that is part of the design of the game. And to be honest, after that, I can't tell you where the exact kernel came from, but I came rushing into Jay's house, one of our fellow directors, with a napkin with a scribbled drawing of the broadcast room with the screens and the desks and stuff. Because I just suddenly thought, that's a lot of screens. We're good writers, we're good storytellers. What if you could edit TV? That looks like fun.
Yeah. I mean, particularly because it wasn't the first game that we've made. We've made a couple of smaller ones previously, right? Because we actually met through youth theatre, and we're a bunch of comedians, musicians, kind of creatives, not necessarily traditional game devs in terms of code and visual art. So part of, I think, to be fair, when you came up with this idea was actually to utilize those skills, something that makes it a bit different and something that we can do, rather than the traditional coding aspect, which obviously we have since hired coders. That's why the game exists. But in terms of the initial directors, that wasn't kind of our skill set at the time.
Yeah, and then I guess we knocked together a prototype where we had a really simple room, and we just found that real basic mechanic of cutting cameras, bleeping sensors, just that kind of creative make a TV show thing was super fun, and also was an amazing way for us to deliver story where you can kind of have this interactive story but it isn't broken up in that kind of traditionally FMV way of that. Like, I feel like it's more immersive because you can buy that you actually are. It creates that real live feeling, I think.
Definitely.
Is anyone on your team like a newsroom operator or an anchor? Because you guys kind of like nailed that feel of what it's like. I used to work in a news studio, and it's exactly what it feels like.
That's so cool.
Great. No, actually, to be honest, no. We've all kind of, as Andy said earlier, come from various backgrounds. Like Den, our like DOP, came from the film industry. Jay and I have come from theatre as well as Andy. So yeah, I've worked in TV, but never on that side of it.
I think Jay has been once or twice. He was like at the BBC. He's been like on the other side behind the cameras, but certainly we've never worked on that side. That I think we had when we first released, we had someone else who worked at like BBC Wales or someone. ITV, that was it. And he told us a similar thing. And I think that's probably one of the biggest compliments we've had, is that we've obviously done a lot of research and tried to capture that feeling, but to actually hear it from real professionals that have them go, it does feel like that.
To be totally honest as well, to like put our hands up, also we've also kind of thrown some of that stuff away. Like we've been completely ruthless to go, that's not fun. We've just it's a game. It has to be fun. It has to be engaging. So actually that was kind of our focus. And in a way, it was a bit of a fluke that it kind of has that feel. But the most important thing was which parts of, because obviously, this is about 12 people's jobs that are kind of all smushed into one. And we had to try and find which of these are possible and fun to do at the same time, whilst also being able to have any idea what's going on those screens.
You guys talk about the story, what's going on in the world of your game.
Well, so it's a dystopia. It's kind of a newsroom TV simulator in an alternate parallel Britain, really. We never really kind of...
In the 1980s-ish.
Yeah, ish. As the nation kind of stumbles towards dystopia. So you start off, it's day one, it's the election. There's this radical government has come to power. They've got all these amazing plans, and that kind of becomes more oppressive over time. Maybe they ask you to censor things that you may or may not choose to do, depending on what you want to do. You get to pick the different headlines, which kind of steers the public's opinion about celebrities and events, and that kind of shapes the world and where you end up at the end of the game, based entirely on the crazy stuff that you've decided to put on TV.
Yeah.
It's very interesting. I mean, there's obviously the game's rooted in humor, but there is also a lot of like post-dystopian, like about a lot of mannerisms and subtext about like ethics and journalism, like in general. Like you guys, it's really hard to try to get that humor across as well. Like were there challenges in trying to make the game funny but have serious tones at the same time, be fun all at the same time?
I'm going to start on this one because he writes most of the funny in the game. So Jay and Al write the script. I write the story beside, and I've written, the odd thing like an advert here and there, but the vast majority of the script is written by Jay and Al. And the way that they tend to split it tends to be Jay does a lot of the political diatribe at first, Al does a lot of the comedic at first, and then they switch, redraft, and go through that way. But it comes to this mind, and I still distinctly remember, so we're 2 years from initial release into early access, and Sportsboard, which is obviously off the wall humor and kind of, it's not this dystopia at all, right? It's this kind of crazy new idea,
very surrealist Monty Python made up sports game. And
basically. I remember one of your biggest concerns, because at that point that was your big baby, was how is this going to be received? How is that married into this thing? And as it turns out, I think it comes back to what Al said earlier in terms of what the game is, right? It's about telling this story, and actually the fact that it's live allows us to get away with a lot more of that, because as a player you kind of go in to go, okay, this is all happening in front of me, I don't have time to kind of stop or think or kind of go through. It's just this is that, and then they're moving on, and our actors are so good at tying it all together. But I think it's one of those things where if you were tying separate clip shows, I don't think it would meld as well in that sense. But because we do, I mean, this I'm kind of now for like the sitcom particularly has evolved over time.
Yeah, a lot of it has evolved. And in terms of challenge, I think it wasn't really a challenge to keep things funny so much as what was challenging was it just kind of naturally, I think we all always fall back on humor. We're very South Park in a way. There's a lot of knob gags and bum jokes knocking around. So if anything, I'd say we probably struggle to keep things serious sometimes, but it was really important to us to get the right pacing of the game, that we wanted to kind of missell you at different points by drawing you in with this kind of surreal, silly, fun game. And then that gives us, that full sense of security where we can hit you hard with a bit of emotional heft. But yeah, that's definitely a big tactic of the game, is to kind of keep you guessing. And we try to do that politically as well, that we kind of, without trying to give too much away, we try to kind of mislead you about different extent. It's a game about extremism. We've got an extremist government on one side and an extremist resistance movement on the other political end of the spectrum. And at different points in the game, we try and make one look promising or good, and then suddenly do a left turn to kind of, it's this constant thing of, these are the good things going on over here, and these are the bad things. Now, quick over, like this is a lot of that. Quick left turns is the strategy.
Yeah, we try to do that balance, don't we? Pros and cons to both sides. And as you never really know where you're going to end up by making one choice, because there are those hidden consequences on both sides. And
that's all about, can you live with yourself?
Exactly. Yeah. What's the trade-off that you can deal with?
How thick is your script for this game? Because I mean, I know a lot of times when people are making story-based games, they can be really big.
There are about 300 pages per episode, so it's probably coming up to about 1,000 pages, I reckon.
Yeah, so because you've got to bear in mind that obviously this script has got, so the game
that's
itself,
just the filmed content.
Well, this is it exactly. So the game itself, a playthrough, we reckon is about 10 hours, one kind of playthrough, right? So it's not a huge long game in that sense. But what we've done is, as we've said already, consequences, right? Pros, cons, you make this decision, therefore this happens. We've tried to give that breadth. So you could play twice and have, I don't want to say entirely different games because we're not going to oversell, but like very, very dramatically different storylines will develop based on your choices, right? So that means that script is huge.
Even bigger than that, yeah.
Because just because one playthrough isn't that long, we've tried to cover the bases across every single breath. So
in fact, we recently discovered that we accidentally broke a Guinness World Record. Because we were like, we must be, I'm not sure there's a game with this much video content in it before. So we Googled it and found that the folks over at the Vecchi Studios, they had
Curious Case of Dr. Decker, isn't it?
Yeah, and it was like 7 hours or something.
7 hours 11 minutes, I think it was roughly.
And then we did the maths and realized we had 43 hours an hour. So
42 hours 57.
42:57.
Yeah. So we
accidentally absolutely destroyed the world record.
But
but part of that is of course because a lot of our stuff is shot from 4 angles, so it's kind of like the length of the game times 4
in certain aspects and stuff. And then you have all the adverts as well, of course, as the sequels and all that kind of thing. So it's it adds up. It's almost like we filmed a TV show and then made it into a video game.
Yeah, that is what
you filmed multiple TV shows. It sounds like multiple different talk shows and thieves
in the middle of a pandemic for some reason.
Yes, exactly. We thought that would be a good plan.
Can you talk about some of these TV shows we'll experience in your game? I know we see your standard news show, but there's also like behind the scenes stuff. Something about a Christmas party, I believe I saw in the trailer.
So yeah, mostly centers around the national nightly news, but again, without trying to give too much away, what happens to the news and kind of our sort of quite on the nose satire is about what television can become when you stop telling the truth and when you stop showing people what's actually happening. And as you said earlier, that kind of journalistic integrity takes a back seat. What kind of keeps the people happy? So yeah, it is in theory the news, but the stuff that's on the news is not what is on our news. There's
the quest for ratings ends up changing the content, isn't it? That's essentially what happens.
Yeah, and also by its nature, it's a game about what's not for broadcast, what can't you show on TV. So obviously we're always like pushing for something a little bit more outrageous that you're not allowed to show, whether it's a naked streaker breaks into a sports game and starts running around. You have to make sure you're not pointing the camera at that, for God's sake.
Yeah, exactly.
You know, it's got some of the most creative swear words in the entire world, because again it's a lot of fun to censor people's swear words. And then we also then get to have a lot of fun later on when you start censoring ideas, and that's when it starts to get even more interesting, is that you take this really funny silly concept at the beginning of don't show the bums on, and don't let him say the S word, or call someone a twat, but then later on, once it starts to get a bit darker, suddenly what those words aren't, it's the stuff you're not allowed to show isn't bums or swear words, it's ideas and concepts and the truth. So
so I guess, without, as you say, not wanting to spoil, but really it's the range from anywhere from theoretically hard-hitting news interviews to sports events to sitcoms.
There's a sitcom where you have to add your own sound effects to mimic what
like
the
laugh
audience
tracks
was.
And stuff like that. So we tried to cover that gambit and tie it together in that narrative, as Alice said, of that kind of changing quest of what the news is.
Musical numbers as well. We have to cut together different musical numbers. There's a little theatre performance. Yes, it's a very stupid sport, if you can even call it a sport.
Basically, Tiny Build backed us and we went, oh, okay, you're going to let us do it? Well, we're going to have some fun and make as much kind of crazy TV as we can. And here we are.